Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we will explore the cause and effect of just saying yes in your everyday life or in business. I will dig into topics that are not just stimulating, but will challenge you to be better in everything you do. The podcast is based on the simplicity of saying yes to opportunities you might encounter every single day. I'm your host, Jim Riley. Join me in my first series titled Blue Collar Redefined. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Answer is Yes podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. You know, we're 3 weeks into this new year. I'm already in full stride. I have some incredible projects on the table, enjoying the process of getting to work in 2019. Not only the work, but also the workout. My Spartan season's going to be kicking off here at the end of the month. Going to be racing out in Chino on January 26th and 27th. So if you're into Spartan racing or you want to give it a try, there's a race here. I call it local because it's in Chino. It's fairly close to my house. But it's worth giving it a try. Saturday's the 8-mile race with about 30 obstacles, and Sunday is the 3 to 5 mile race. So anyways, if you've been intrigued enough to go Spartan racing, this is a good month. The weather's perfect. Not going to be too hot out there, and it'll be a lot of fun. And if you do show up, please let me know you're coming. Let's connect. My race start time is 8:45 both days. So enough of that. In regards to the podcast, you know, I really appreciate everybody's patience and or tolerance of sound quality. I understand that 95% of my guests are call-in guests. And the sound quality is not as good as it could be if we were just in the studio together. But with that being said, the opportunity to allow people to call in has given me better guests and has made me very flexible for their time schedule and abilities to be on the show. So I'm hoping that content over quality of sound is appealing enough for people to stay tuned and listen and be a little bit patient with the imperfections. And, you know, I like to talk about authenticity in my business, and this is no exception to that. You know, these are phone calls. We're trying to be as authentic as possible. We don't overproduce, although I do have a great producer that helps out, Jim Beaver, who's got a show. If you haven't listened to it, check him out. But at any rate, we're going to continue in 2019 by taking as many call-ins as we can so that we can maintain a high level of guests. I know a lot of them live out on the East Coast, New York City, etc., and bring you hopefully some fascinating stories. So again, thank you for your tolerance on that. You know, one of the things that I've been learning through this process is that we as humans, we're just fascinating. My wife said it to me a couple weeks ago when Julian, who was last week's guest, sent me over a video on YouTube to be on the show. And I pop it up. I said, hey, check this out, honey. And she goes, I'm just fascinated by people. I love that this person took the time to send you a video. And she just likes the process. You know, my wife is very social, and I've become very social because of her. I'd like to say a part of that because of her. And just taking the time to appreciate everybody for who they are, what they stand for, and, you know, their own trials and tribulations, you know, that they're going through. And I don't know, I like to step back and just learn a little bit about people. So today's guest is no exception to sitting back and seeing what people are all about and all the fascinating things we get involved with. Today's guest proves that hard work and passion can give you a lifetime career in what you love to do, even if it's passed down through the family. And I don't know, maybe some of you have received a business from your parents, and maybe it's not the first thing on your list of items you want to do, but at the same time, maybe it is. Maybe it's something that you could be very, very passionate about and be successful about. And today's guest, John Leonetti, is no exception to that. And I just love his story and the fact that it was a family business passed down that he worked. But you'll hear in the tone of his voice how incredibly stoked he is to be doing what he's doing all these years later. And I hope that we can all aspire to feel the same way about our careers, the decisions that we've made, both in business and in life. So with that, we're going to give John a ring, get him on the phone, and have a great interview with him. Hey, John, I'm happy to have you on the line. Welcome to the show. It's great to be talking to you today. How are you?
I'm really good on this rainy Monday, looking out over the ocean here in San Clemente, with the clouds hanging over there, and it's a good rainy day to talk to you.
Well, you're probably making my East Coast listeners a little bit jealous about looking over the coast. I know the Pacific Ocean is so beautiful, especially down in San Clemente, man. You're in God's country down there.
Awesome. It is God's country. It's a really peaceful surf community. It's chill. Very nice people live here, and I feel blessed. I feel really thankful to live here. I'm a LA boy, born and raised, and moved here about 8 years ago because of the surf, actually, when our kids were old enough. And I got to tell you, it is kind of heaven on earth, really.
Yeah, San Clemente is a special place, and for an LA boy, as you call it, to discover that piece of paradise, you're pretty fortunate because not everybody does, but I'm glad that you did. Speaking of LA, I know a little bit about your history, and I'm really happy to have you on the show to talk about what you do. Could you give us a little background on, who John is and how you got into the business of you play a critical role in making movies?
Well, gosh, I'll tell you how it happened. Born again and raised in Los Angeles. My father, Frank Leonetti, in the mid-'50s, well, go back further. My father traveled out from Utah, of all places, and was like an electrical engineer, actually. And he ended up playing baseball with these guys from Fox Studios way back when. He was a really good baseball player. And through that, they asked, hey, you want to get in the studios? This is back before The Wizard of Oz, okay? My dad ended up being an electrician on the movie The Wizard of Oz, the original.
Wow, okay.
And, yeah, and then that was at MGM. And then he became a gaffer, which is like a lighting director. And he gaffed the movie that everybody else would know as well, just for example, Singing in the Rain. So my dad lit Singing in the Rain, and that's just the beginning of his story and his legacy. And he formed a business, a motion picture equipment rental business in the mid-'50s, which is basically when I was born. And it was in Hollywood on Sunset near Western. And I grew up in that business, climbing on electrical cable and all that. And then by the time I was 13, I just went to work in it because that's what you do in a Catholic Italian household. You go, we have a family business, you work in the business. And I wasn't going to the beach every day of the summer after that anymore. And, school and work was, it's been the rest of my life pretty much now. But that's how I originally got into it. And what was interesting is, my dad was a visionary in terms of equipment he made for the business to kind of transfer the industry from studio work to location work. And he came up with a lot of ideas and lighting, literally lighting systems and stuff that allowed you to put the equipment on trucks and make it mobile and go out and light a neighborhood, for example.
Huh, wow.
And it's really cool. I mean, he was the first one with this guy Jack Beckett, to understand that you can use car lamps, headlamps at the time, which are PAR globes. They were the first ones to use PARs. A spot PAR globe at 120 volts is actually pumped up to 220 volts. Okay, they figured this out. It is as much light as a 10,000 watt bulb in a normal movie light, but the light's much smaller. The cable is much smaller, so it doesn't have the exact same photometrics and or spread, but it makes a really great light, actually. Mm-hmm. And it was from that kind of started my dad's business. And from there, I'd go on and on about the different things that he did. Like one other thing I can tell you, which is super interesting, is he figured out instead of using hardwood for shiny boards, reflector boards you use outside to catch the sun and, fill or put a lit edge on someone, he figured out you could use radiator cores from cars. They're flat and they're strong and they're light. Mm-hmm. So that's just another example. I could go on, okay? But that's the family I grew up in, and I don't know if you can hear this beeping right now. Sorry.
No, but, good.
Okay, good. Anyway, so I was introduced to the business that way. But what's interesting is, when I was a little boy, I used to draw and paint. I was never formally trained, but I just liked it. So I was kind of into the art thing a little bit. And I draw, first it was like dragsters and monsters. And then, then girls came along, and then, the art part went out the door, but I had an affinity towards it, and I didn't know that I would fall in love actually with making movies. And aside from working in our family business and learning how to manufacture lighting and grip equipment, I would run generators. I did a little bit of every job, and our company was called Leonetti Cine Rentals at the time, and it was called also Leonetti School of Cinematography, because so many people came in our back shop and worked there, and then went out in the field in the different branches of either electricians or grips or camera people, because we had a camera department, a sound department, light and gripping, and we had rental trucks. So it was a really interesting experience. I'm very fortunate to have that experience, and then fall in love with it. Light, falling in love with light and how it creates a mood, and then creatively how to appreciate that and have a vision for it, and then technically how to pull it off, because you get to use like both sides of your brain. And for me, it was just really challenging, and it wasn't easy. I mean, I worked my ass off, but I love it, and I loved it, and I became ultimately an assistant cameraman, and then I worked my way up to becoming a cinematographer actually. And by the time I was 31, I became a cinematographer. I was one of the youngest ones in the world, and I ended up not too long after that shooting a movie called The Mask with Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz. So I was a cinematographer on that movie, and that was the beginning of my career in cinematography that pretty much launched me.
Yeah. Okay.
And
now I got a couple questions for you before we get too far past it.
Sure. Sure.
You talk about falling in love with light and what you can do with light and capturing that image. And I would venture to say that all these, the younger generation that's all over Instagram and Facebook and all these different apps on the phone, they all have these editing tools. And what I've noticed is that most of those editing tools have to do with lighting and shading and things like that. And I bet they've never really put the two together, because what you fall in love with, I imagine the hard way, is now on your iPhone app for Instagram, right?
It's kind of interesting. Once the digital world came about in photography, okay?
Yeah.
Everything changed, and it's gotten to the point where we are right where you are with apps and light editing apps and manipulation of light, and people are starting to see how you can do that in the digital format. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you go back in time a little bit, I come from the days of film when you had to know how to expose it. You didn't see it till the next day, and you would watch your work the next day in awe, or hopefully in awe, of the mystery and the excitement of what you did, and not just what me personally, but we did as a whole crew, in making movies. And it's all very technical, but it's also very artistic. And I think what's interesting today is these apps at least give, the younger folks a chance to appreciate that those nuances are there, and it can change the look and the mood and the feeling of a picture. That's still or moving picture. I got to talk for hours about that stuff. But what's interesting is the digital world, the digital realm, was something that actually my dad, I'm going to go back to him for a moment, because he was a visionary. In addition to renting equipment, we built a motion picture camera that competed with Panaflex, Panavision, Aeroflex, Movie-Cam, and we made movies, and television shows were made with our motion picture camera. That we had our own factory, we had our own lenses, and it's a whole other chapter in the book of my life and our life. But the point I'm making is, beyond that, my dad said to me, I'll never forget, it was like early 80s or so, that the digital world is the future, and so we went to in Pasadena to JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab there, and we met this